Hello there, this is Will from Stacks for Stacks, and today I'm putting together a video to walk you through the basics of using my new CalcStack. CalcStack has a primary function of letting you create simple calculators to put on your web pages. This could be for tasks like shipping calculators, job quote estimators, product pricing, infographics, education, anything like that. Typically you can build calculators yourself using a mixture of HTML and JavaScript, but unless you've got experience with using those sort of markup languages, it can become very complicated and tedious. And likewise, if you were to approach a front-end web developer to create a new calculator for you, because this is kind of like at the higher level of what they would do, you can expect it would be quite expensive. So CalcStack basically fills a gap in the market. It provides a simple stack which you can drag and drop into your RapidWeaver website web pages. You can then configure your own calculators to perform all sorts of different tasks and sums and calculations and such like. And of course, because you're developing it and you're actually deploying it yourself, if you need to go back and make changes to the calculator, it's very easy to do so, and you don't have to sort of wait and rely on somebody else to do it for you. So without further ado, I will show you quickly how to get a CalcStack working. You want to start by opening your library and searching for CalcStack, and just drag and drop a copy into a Stacks page. The editing interface for CalcStack is pretty straightforward. You've got the main CalcStack itself, and over here on the right hand side we've got options to display different buttons. We can also change the appearance of the calculator form on the web page as well. And then the actual calculation itself, if we select that, you can see we've got basically two inputs and an answer. So input 1 can be a choice of different things, checkboxes, range sliders, number boxes, anything like that. Then we have an operator, and in mathematical terms this is basically where we're doing something to a number. In CalcStack you can add, subtract, divide, multiply, or perform a modulus. And then we've also got a second input box. Again, same as the first input box, choice of different input options available, and we can customize how the answer is presented in terms of whether we apply any rounding, decimal points, things like that. We can hide the answer in any of these input boxes if we want to. We can give all these input boxes a nice label so it's understandable to the end user what each box does, and we can also prepend and append units onto these input boxes and the answer box as well. And straight away, if I just go and preview this page in RapidWeaver, although I've not changed any settings whatsoever, you can see we've got ourselves a simple calculator working here. And if I put in my own numbers, you can see this is updating live on the page. I'm not having to click a submit button or anything like that. Let's start with one of those old school favourites of a temperature converter, where we convert Fahrenheit units of measurement into Celsius units of measurement. To start with, I'm going to open the Stacks library. I'm going to search for CalcStack and drag and drop a copy into the page like this. We can assume that we need to receive the temperature in Fahrenheit from the user. So for the first number box, I'm going to leave it as a number box that the user can type a number into. We'll just set the default to something like 48. Don't need to change anything to do with steps, and we don't want to hide the input. As soon as a person enters this unit of temperature into the first box, we need to actually do something. So we're going to subtract by a factor of 32. So in this second input box, I'm going to opt for a fixed value, and I'm just going to enter 32 like that. Now I'm going to add another calculation to my form here. I'm going to give this calculation an ID of just calculation 2. You'll notice that each calculation I add has a unique ID, and this is simply so we can pass calculated values from one calculation down to another line and so forth. And in this instance I'm going to select calculation 2, and I want to take the answer generated from the first calculation and have that in input box 1. So I'm going to select input or answer from another calculation, and we've got calculation 1 selected in the settings, and I want to use the answer from that first calculation. Right now I want to multiply this number by a value of 5. So again, I'm going to opt for a fixed value, and we've already got 5 in the box there for us. And then finally we need to divide that number by 9. I'm going to add another calculation, and I will change this to calculation 3 in the settings, and we're going to go for input or answer from another calculation, and we're going to go for the answer from calculation 2, like that. And for operator we're going to divide, and we're going to go for a factor of 9, so I'm going to opt for fixed value 9, like that. And if I go and preview the page now, we should have ourselves a working calculator. So as a test, if I type in 61 Fahrenheit, you can see down here, bottom right hand side, it's converted it into Celsius, which is 16 Celsius. Obviously we can make this form a bit more user friendly for people. So in the first calculation I'm going to append a unit of measurement of Fahrenheit. So type that like so, and then in the final calculation field I'm going to append the unit of measurement again of Celsius. And I'll go back and preview the page, and you can see it's telling the user what unit of measurement to use there and what unit of measurement to use there. Now, one obvious problem you can see straight away is that this is quite complicated. There's a lot of boxes which are shown to the user, but they don't actually do anything. I mean, I can't actually select or change any of these numbers, and to be honest, they don't need to be shown. What I'm going to do is to actually hide some of these inputs. So we definitely want the first input shown, but I'm going to hide the second input of this first calculation, and I'm going to hide the answer. For the second calculation we can hide everything, so I'm going to hide input 1, hide input 2 and hide the answer. And on this third and final calculation within CalcStack I'm going to hide the first input, and I'm going to hide the second input, but I'm going to keep the answer displayed. And if I preview the calculator now, you can see that's a lot more user friendly. But you will notice that there's a slight gap up here on the right hand side. That's quite easy to fix. I'm just going to select the main CalcStack and I'm going to turn off inline form. And when I go back and preview the page now, you can see everything's lined up nicely. And I can just check that it still works. So I can type in 61 Fahrenheit and that converts it into 16 degrees Celsius for us. I strongly suspect that quite a few people will be wanting to use CalcStack to build and deploy cost calculators to go on websites, and for this task CalcStack is perfect. I've gone ahead and built a sample cost calculator here on this page. You can see that we start by getting, in this case we're going to calculate the size of a room to be carpeted and what the total cost would be. So we start by taking the length and width from the user in meters, and we basically times length by width, which gives us the estimated room size in meters squared. I've provided a select menu here to choose what type of carpet somebody would want, and whatever factor is selected here is multiplied by the room size to give the cost here. And you can see the room size here is passed down to the room size field here. So we're actually able to reuse values without having to build a very complicated form or have people re-enter values again. Next we've got a series of little checkbox options here. So we could say we want some underlay. I'm very clumsy and with red wine, so I want some stain protection. And because I'm no good at DIY, I want it fitted. And these optional extras, you see, we just tally these up to see what they equal. And again, we're timesing the optional extras by the room size, which gives us a cost of all the extras based on the room size. Moving a bit further down to this step 4, we've got the cost of the optional extras, which has come from this box here. And we've got a few fixed rate options we could add on as well. So we could have delivery of a carpet and recycling and safe disposal of the carpet too. So that comes to a total of 70. So we can add total of optional extras plus these fixed rate items together, and that gives us the total cost of all the extras here in this box. And then finally, for the grand total, we can say the total cost of all the extras plus the total of the carpet, which comes from up here on the form, and then we've got a sum grand total here of all the inputs together. So we can put together quite a realistic estimate for our customers. And again, like with the temperature converter, there's quite a few ways I can go in to tidy up this form to remove options which the user doesn't need to see. In particular, for example, on these checkbox options, you can actually, in the settings, turn off this input box underneath here, so the person would just see the checkbox options on their own. CalcStack is using Twitter Bootstrap for its styling, but even so I would agree that the forms generated by CalcStack are a little on the bland and boring side of things, and it'd be nice to sort of jazzy them up a bit and make them more presentable to use within your web pages. Prime example of that would be a simple infographic that you want to present to users. This is just a simple one I've put together regarding sustainable transport, just a calculator that estimates how many cars will be removed from the road if people used public transport instead of their own personal vehicles, and it also calculates an estimated sum of how much CO2 would be saved a year if those extra cars weren't used. You can see on the screen it's a bit bland and boring, but we can change that quite quickly. I'm going to select the main calc stack, and in the stack settings scroll right down to the bottom where there's a background option, and in here I can choose to use an image, and I can browse my computer for a suitable image. I've got one here of some traffic congestion, which should work quite well, and I can apply some extra internal padding around the forms as well, just to keep it spaced in from the edge. I'll go and preview the page now. You can see that's working a lot better, it looks a lot better, but I think that we've got the same problem as what we had with the cost calculator and the temperature converter, in that we've got rather too many form fields here showing to the user. It's a bit complicated, so I think we need to have a little exercise of decluttering the form slightly. So I'm going to select the first calculation, and I can see the first input is a range slider. Then we divide by 1.6, which is an estimated value of how many people are in a single car. So because that's a fixed value, person can't actually change it, I'm going to actually hide that second input, but I will, for interest, just keep the number of cars removed from the road displayed. Onto this second calculation, we're going to borrow the answer from the first calculation, so this answer here will basically end up here, and we're multiplying that by a factor of 4.7, and again a person can't change this, so we might as well not display either of these two input fields here. So I'm going to hide the first one, I'm also going to opt to hide the second one. I'll go and preview the page quickly. You can see it's a lot better now, fewer fields, it's easier for people to understand how it works. So I can move the slider across, so let's say 24 people using public transport instead of a personal car. So on average that means there'd be 15 less cars on the road, and over the course of a year that would save 71 tonnes of CO2 emissions. You've got the option in the stack settings of turning on various buttons which can be used to do things like copy the answer to a user's clipboard. You can mail it as a simple HTML message. You can also display a reset or reload button. You can submit the answer as a hash. You can also submit all inputs as a query string, or you can even put up a button which will share the answer to Twitter along with a customizable comment. In this example, I'm actually going to submit the answer as a hash onto another page. Now, hash simply means that the answer is appended onto the end of the page link, so when the new page opens we can actually grab the answer and reuse it within that page. To demonstrate the concept, I've just opted to build a very simple calculator here. It's just purely number of apples and a range slider, and we can choose a number like so. But what I've done is to add a second page to my project just called hash display, and on this page I've set up a series of toggle plus stacks, and you can see I can click and these just open and close. What I've done is to give each of these toggle plus stacks a unique ID in the settings. Let's just open that so you can see each one's got a unique ID like this. And what I've done on my CalcStack page here is I've opted to submit the answer as a hash, and I'm going to send the answer onto this hash display page, the one which has got the toggle plus stacks on it. We're going to use the hash of apples because we're using IDs of apples for each of these toggle plus stacks, and that should work. Now don't worry if I've lost you already, because it's actually quite simple what's going to happen here, and there are some instructions at the bottom of the stack here to say what's going to happen. We can't actually test this inside of RapidWeaver because RapidWeaver lacks an address bar, but I can switch over to a normal web browser, and here we've got our range slider with apples, so I could choose 4 apples for example, and I'm going to submit the answer. And what you'll see straight away is we've now navigated away from that CalcStack page onto our page of the toggle plus stacks, and the 4th toggle plus stack has opened automatically because we selected 4 apples on the previous page. And the way this simply works is that you can see up here in the address bar at the top, and I'll just highlight it for you. When we navigated over onto this page, CalcStack actually put in a hashtag and then the word apples 4 for us. So when this page loaded, Toggle Plus knew straight away that the 4th Toggle Plus stack on this page needed to be opened as the page loaded. And it's as simple as that really, and this is a great way to pass values from CalcStack over onto other pages and interact with other stack elements within your website. In the previous example I showed you, you might be quite excited by the prospect of being able to use CalcStack to pass values and answers over onto other pages and indeed interact with other stacks. And this is something which can be extended to include the RapidWeaver contact form page too. What we can do is in the main CalcStack itself is to switch on the button which will submit all inputs as a query string. I can give my button a simple label and I can just set it as a link through to my contact form page. And if I click onto my contact form page here, again this is just a standard RapidWeaver contact form page. The only exception is that in the sidebar I've put in some jQuery JavaScript code. This may look very complicated, but I can assure you, you simply need to copy and paste this into your sidebar and everything should work as expected. You don't really need to know the technicalities of what this code is doing. All it's basically doing is looking at the browser address bar and extracting the relevant bits of information and pre-populating form fields in the RapidWeaver contact form. As per the last example, RapidWeaver doesn't have an address bar, so to test this we actually have to use a real web browser. I've got a simple CalcStack here, and I can just customize a few options here and to get an estimated cost. And if I click on submit all, it now redirects through to the RapidWeaver contact form page. You can see straight away that the first few fields are already populated with the numbers I selected on the previous page. And if we look closely at the browser address bar at the top here, you can actually see where those numbers are coming from. We've got the names of the inputs, we've got the answer input showing, there's some little equal signs, and then we've actually got the values that I previously entered. And that's how those values come through onto this page. If you want something more powerful than the RapidWeaver contact form for submitting customer correspondence and calculations, you can't go wrong with Forms Plus by Chili Dog Software. This is a separate stack you can purchase, and it basically splits a larger form up into a series of very user-friendly steps. As an example here on my screen, I've got a contact form built with Forms Plus, which I've split up into a series of steps. But most importantly, you'll notice that when I go through to the second step, I've actually got my CalcStack embedded as part of Forms Plus. And I can actually move the slider here and I can change the numbers. And the calculator is functioning completely normally. Difference here though is that when I submit this form with Forms Plus, these calculations will get included with the contact form. So this is a brilliant way to integrate the CalcStack with a much more complex form setup. In order to get this working, firstly you'll need to add a Forms Plus stack to your web page. You'll then need to add a series of steps, and in one of the steps you'll need to add a blank stack. Within the blank stack you then drag and drop in a CalcStack, and in the CalcStack settings you just need to make sure that the integrate with Forms Plus option at the top here is selected. This ensures that there's some extra code included with the stack to ensure we've got maximum compatibility with Forms Plus. But from then onwards it'll work fine. You don't need to add any extra custom code or JavaScript to the website. Everything should work just fine. I hope you found this video of interest and useful. The webpage for CalcStack is stacksforstacks.com/CalcStack. On this page you can read all the documentation about the stack, you can view some working examples of it, and you can also download a free demo version which you can use to play around with on your own computer and explore the stack further. Should you have any further questions, then feel free to get in contact with me via email. I can be reached via the Stacks for Stacks website on the contact page.